Sydney Young stood in the rooftop doorway at 11:47 p.m., watching her husband kiss another woman under the string lights she had hung herself last summer. Justin Gaffney had his hands tangled in Brielle's hair, their neighbor from 14C, the woman who borrowed sugar and smiled too sweetly every morning in the elevator. The woman who'd attended their dinner parties and complimented Sydney's cooking while apparently planning to devour her marriage. Sydney counted 30 seconds of watching them, her face carved from stone, her breathing steady and controlled. Neither of them noticed her. They were too busy destroying everything she had built over 7 years of marriage. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't feel anything except a cold, surgical clarity spreading through her chest like frost across glass. Her heart rate never elevated. Her hands didn't tremble. She simply observed, cataloguing every detail with the precision of someone documenting evidence for a trial that would come later. The way Justin's thumb traced Brielle's jawline, the same gesture he'd used with Sydney on their honeymoon, the way Brielle's laugh sounded breathless and performative, the way neither of them had the decency to choose somewhere private for their betrayal. They'd done this on her rooftop, under her lights, in her home. Sydney turned around, walked back into the stairwell, and pulled the rooftop door closed behind her. The lock engaged with a metallic snap that echoed down 3 flights of concrete stairs. She tested the handle once, twice, confirming they were trapped. Then she smiled for the first time that night, a cold expression that would have terrified anyone who saw it. She descended to the electrical room on the 2nd floor, her heels clicking against each step with metronomic precision. The sound echoed in the empty stairwell like a countdown. The master key Justin never knew she possessed, obtained 6 months ago when she'd started suspecting something was wrong, slid into the lock like a blade finding its target. Inside, the breaker panel hummed with power, dozens of switches controlling every light, every outlet, every comfort in this luxury building where they'd spent $3,800 a month to live above their means. Sydney flipped them, one by one. Methodically, the satisfying click of each breaker shutting down felt like justice condensed into sound. Living room, bedrooms, hallways, emergency lighting, elevators. She shut down everything except the fire safety systems, which were on a separate grid. The entire building plunged into darkness. Brielle's scream pierced through concrete and steel, muffled but unmistakable, high-pitched and panicked. Sydney's expression never changed. She locked the electrical room, pocketed the key, and walked back to their penthouse on the 15th floor, navigating the pitch-black hallway from memory, her hand trailing along the wall, her steps confident despite the absolute darkness. Inside their home, she pulled her phone from her pocket and turned on the flashlight. The beam illuminated their bedroom, the California king bed they'd christened on their honeymoon in Santorini, the framed photos of happier times that now felt like evidence of her own stupidity. Wedding photos, vacation photos, anniversary celebrations where she'd believed his lies about working late. Sydney opened the closet and removed exactly 1 suitcase, the same carry-on they'd bought together at the luggage store 3 years ago. She packed with robotic efficiency, 7 days of clothing folded with military precision, toiletries, her laptop, charging cables, passport, birth certificate, social security card. No photos, no sentimental items, nothing that would slow her down or make her reconsider what she was about to do. She walked to Justin's study and opened the wall safe he thought was hidden behind the abstract painting she'd never liked. The combination was her birthday. How fitting that he'd used her own numbers to secure the money she was about to take. Inside sat their emergency fund, $47,000 in cash, bundled in neat stacks of hundreds, the money she'd insisted they saved despite Justin's protests that they should invest it. Sydney removed every bill, counted it twice to confirm the amount, zipped the money into her carry-on, and left the safe door hanging open like a mouth mid-scream. Her phone glowed as she booked a one-way flight to Miami, departing in 4 hours from Newark. First class. The ticket cost $1,847. She deserved it. She deserved so much more than she was taking, but this would be the beginning. Sydney returned to their bedroom one final time. She removed her wedding ring, the 2-carat diamond Justin had spent 3 months' salary on, back when he actually worked for his money instead of embezzling from their company. She placed it in the exact center of his pillow, adjusting it with her fingertips until it sat perfectly straight. A small act of consideration in the midst of devastation. Then she walked out, locked the penthouse door behind her with the same calm precision she'd used for everything else tonight, and took the emergency stairwell down to the parking garage. Her footsteps echoed in the darkness. Other residents were starting to emerge from their apartments with flashlights and confused voices, wondering about the power outage. Sydney passed them like a ghost, invisible in her purpose. Her Mercedes started on the first try. She programmed the airport into her GPS and drove away from everything she had known, her hands steady on the wheel, her eyes dry and clear. The dashboard clock read 12:23 a.m. She'd destroyed her marriage and escaped in 36 minutes. Above her, Justin and Brielle remained trapped on the rooftop in complete darkness. She imagined them stumbling around, calling for help that wouldn't come, slowly realizing that the door was locked and their phones had no signal up there behind all that concrete and steel. The building's backup generator wouldn't kick in for another 2 hours. She'd checked the building specs months ago. Maintenance wouldn't arrive until their 6 a.m. shift change. They had 6 hours in the dark to think about what they'd done, 6 hours to panic and regret and understand that someone had witnessed their betrayal and reacted with calculated precision. Sydney was already through airport security when Justin's first call came through at 1:23 a.m. Her phone buzzed against her thigh, his name illuminating her screen with its familiar glow. She glanced at it, then returned the phone to her purse without answering. It buzzed again at 1:24 a.m. and again at 1:26 a.m. She counted 23 calls during her wait at gate B17, watching the number tick up with the same detachment she'd felt watching him betray her. She never reached for it, never felt tempted. Each ignored call was another small victory. At 3:47 a.m., Sydney boarded her flight. The cabin lights dimmed as she settled into her first-class seat, the leather soft against her back. She accepted a glass of champagne from the flight attendant, a woman named Jennifer with kind eyes who said, "You look like you need this." Sydney smiled politely. "Long day." "Here's to better tomorrows," Jennifer said. Sydney raised her glass and finally allowed herself to feel something. Not sadness, not anger, just a cold, burning satisfaction that tasted like victory on her tongue, sharp and intoxicating. The plane lifted off at 4:15 a.m. Somewhere below, Justin was probably being rescued by maintenance, discovering an empty penthouse and a missing wife, and beginning to understand that his world had just collapsed. Sydney looked out at the darkness below, the city lights fading into nothing as they climbed above the clouds, and took another sip of champagne. Her phone vibrated again as they reached cruising altitude. A text from an unknown number appeared on her screen. "Sydney, this is Devon Richards, Justin's business partner. We need to talk urgently. There are some financial discrepancies I need to discuss with you. Please call me as soon as possible. This can't wait." Sydney read it twice, then 3 times. Financial discrepancies. The phrase hung in her mind like a promise. She smiled for the second time since standing in that rooftop doorway, an expression that would have terrified anyone who saw it. She typed back, "I'll be in Miami by morning. Send me everything you have, every document, every email, every receipt. I want to see it all." Then she turned off her phone, reclined her seat, and closed her eyes. The real work was about to begin, and she needed to be ready. Justin had no idea what was coming for him, neither did Brielle. They'd trapped themselves on that rooftop tonight, thinking they'd gotten away with something, but Sydney was about to trap them in something far worse. She was about to trap them in the consequences of their choices, and she would make absolutely certain they never escaped. Chapter 2. The Audit. 7 days after Sydney locked Justin on that rooftop, she sat across from Devon Richards in a beachfront cafe in Miami, watching him sweat through his dress shirt despite the air conditioning. "I've been Justin's partner for 3 years, Devon said, sliding a manila folder across the table. "I thought I knew him. I was wrong about everything." Sydney opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, credit card receipts, wire transfers, and photographs. Brielle wearing a diamond necklace worth $38,000. Brielle beside a new Audi Q7 with a bow on the hood. Brielle holding keys to a luxury Tribeca apartment with $8,500 monthly rent. Every gift purchased with company funds. Every expense falsified as business development. Every lie documented. $230,000, Devon said quietly. That's what I've found so far. He was good at hiding it. If he hadn't gotten sloppy recently, I might never have caught it. Sydney studied each document with surgical precision, her face revealing nothing. Her grandmother's $500,000 inheritance had funded Justin's startup. She'd been the silent investor, content to let him take glory while she believed in their future. What a fool she'd been. He gave her access to business credit cards, Devon continued, told me she was consulting on marketing. I never questioned it because revenue looked good on paper, but he was cooking the books, inflating income to hide the bleeding. Where is the company financially? Sydney asked, her voice flat and professional. Leveraged to hell. Justin took out loans against future contracts, used the money for personal expenses, and bet everything on landing a government contract next quarter. If we don't get it, we're bankrupt within 6 months. Sydney watched pelicans dive for fish beyond the cafe windows. The morning sun painted everything gold, beautiful and merciless. I want a complete forensic audit, she said. Every transaction for 3 years, every expense, every email, every client meeting. I want to know where every dollar went. That's going to take weeks and cost upwards of $50,000. I don't care what it costs. My grandmother's money built that company. My money kept it alive. And apparently my money paid for Justin's affair while I worked 60-hour weeks. She met his eyes. Get me the audit. I want documentation that would hold up in court. Devon nodded. Legally, you can freeze all company accounts pending investigation. If there's been embezzlement, you can protect remaining assets. Do it. Today. I want every account frozen before Justin can move another penny. He's going to lose his mind. Good. Sydney closed the folder. I want him to feel exactly what I felt watching him destroy us. Devon left to make calls. Sydney sat alone, watching the ocean and calculating her next moves with cold precision. The waves crashed rhythmically, consistent and relentless, wearing down everything in their path. Her phone rang that afternoon. Justin's name flashed on the screen. She answered, putting him on speaker as she unpacked in her hotel room. Sydney, thank God. Where are you? What happened? I've been trying to reach you for a week. The police thought something happened to you. I filed a missing persons report. I saw you, she said calmly, on the rooftop, with Brielle, at 11:47 p.m. last Tuesday. I stood in the doorway for 30 seconds watching you kiss her under the lights I hung. Silence. Long and damning. Sydney, I can explain. It was a mistake. She kissed me and I was confused. You embezzled $230,000 to buy gifts for your mistress, Sydney interrupted, her voice never rising. Devon's running a forensic audit. All accounts are frozen as of 3 hours ago. We're filing for legal separation of business assets tomorrow. I'm taking my investment back, Justin. Every penny. Wait, you can't just... I can. I'm the majority investor. My inheritance started that company. My money kept it running, and you stole from me to impress another woman. Sydney's voice remained eerily calm. You're done, Justin. Completely done. Please, let me explain. It was a mistake. I was insecure and she made me feel... I don't care about your excuses. You made hundreds of choices over months to betray me and steal from our company. That was who you are. Where are you? Let me come talk to you in person. Please. I love you. If you come here, I'll have hotel security remove you, she said. If you contact me again after this call, I'll file a restraining order. If you try to access company accounts, I'll have you arrested for embezzlement. Do you understand? Sydney, please. She hung up, blocked his number, then called Devon back. How fast can you move the company's intellectual property into a new corporate structure separate from Justin's control? With the right lawyers, Maybe 3 weeks. Why? Because I'm not rebuilding Justin's company. I'm building my own, and he's not invited. Start the paperwork immediately. 40 minutes later, her phone rang from an unknown Los Angeles number. Ms. Young, this is Rebecca Chen from TechWave Solutions. We're a competitor of your husband's firm, and we've been following your career. We'd like to offer you our Chief Executive Officer position. Sydney's heart rate accelerated. Tell me more. Rebecca explained that TechWave had been watching Justin's company, waiting to poach clients and crush them. They'd identified Sydney as the real talent, the strategic mind making smart decisions while Justin took credit. With Sydney's knowledge and reputation, TechWave could dominate the industry. We're offering $400,000 base salary plus equity, Rebecca continued, full operational control. And, Ms. Young, we're based in Atlanta, which means you'd be directly competing with Justin for every Southeast contract. Sydney smiled. When can I start? 3 days later, Sydney signed the contract at TechWave's Atlanta headquarters. Devon joined as Chief Operating Officer, bringing half of Justin's development team, the talented people doing real work while Justin took credit and spent their budget on his mistress. They raided the client list systematically, offered better terms, lower prices, and genuine competence. They watched Justin's revenue collapse in real time. Justin showed up at her hotel on day 6 anyway. Sydney watched from her 14th floor window as security escorted him out. He stood on the sidewalk looking up for 20 minutes, shoulders shaking. Then he walked away, defeated. Sydney felt nothing watching him leave, just cold certainty that she was doing exactly what needed to be done. Her phone buzzed with a reminder. Tomorrow she'd pitch for the $50 million government contract that was supposed to save Justin's company. She was going to take that too, and she was going to make him watch. Chapter 3. The Empire Begins. 8 weeks after Sydney locked that rooftop door, she stood in the TechWave Solutions boardroom in Atlanta, watching Justin's former clients sign contracts that would destroy him. That's the 6th one this month, Devon said, closing his laptop with satisfaction. His revenue's down 62% since you came aboard. At this rate, he'll be bankrupt by Christmas. Sydney studied the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, Atlanta sprawling beneath her like a kingdom waiting to be conquered. She'd transformed TechWave from a regional player into an industry powerhouse by doing exactly what Justin never could. Delivering results without ego, building relationships through genuine competence instead of charm, and pricing services aggressively enough to make his company completely irrelevant. The downtown skyline glittered in the afternoon sun. Somewhere out there, Justin was watching his empire crumble. Sydney wondered if he was thinking about that rooftop kiss, about whether those few moments of weakness with Brielle had been worth losing absolutely everything. What's his cash position? She asked, turning back to Devon. 3 months of runway, maybe 4 if he makes severe cuts. He's been calling clients directly, begging them to reconsider their decisions, offering discounts we both know he can't afford. A few felt sorry for him and listened politely. Most just hung up or forwarded the calls to their assistants. Good. Let him beg. Let him understand what desperation feels like. Her assistant knocked on the glass door. A young woman named Tasha, who'd proven herself invaluable in the 2 months since Sydney's arrival. Ms. Young, another delivery just arrived. The flowers came every Monday like clockwork. 2 dozen white roses, Justin's apology written on cards that said the same thing in slightly different words. I'm sorry. I love you. Please talk to me. I'll do anything to fix this. Please give me a chance. I was wrong. I miss you. I'm begging you. Sydney had her assistant donate them to the hospital across the street, where at least they might bring comfort to people experiencing real suffering. She never read the cards anymore. The first few weeks, she'd opened them with morbid curiosity. Now they went straight to recycling, unread and unwanted. There's also this, her assistant added, handing her a stack of letters bound with a rubber band. They came to the front desk addressed to you personally. Sydney recognized Justin's handwriting immediately. The careful print he'd used since college, slightly slanted to the right. She'd received 43 letters in 8 weeks, each one progressively more desperate and self-aware. She used to read them, cataloguing his evolution from denial to acceptance to what seemed like genuine remorse. Now she just filed them away in a drawer she never opened, letting them pile up like evidence she might need someday, but hoped she wouldn't. "He's been showing up at the building too," Devon said carefully, watching her face for a reaction. "Security's escorted him out twice this week. He just sits in the lobby pretending to wait for someone until they ask him to leave. Should we get a restraining order?" "Not yet. Let him humiliate himself publicly. Other executives are watching. It's good for business when people see that crossing me has permanent consequences." Sydney's phone buzzed with an email notification. She read it twice, then smiled with genuine pleasure. "The government contract. We've been invited to pitch next week." Devon's eyes widened. "The $50 million infrastructure project. Justin's company was the frontrunner. They promised it to him 6 months ago based on preliminary proposals. He built his entire financial strategy around winning it, took out loans against the expected revenue, told everyone who'd listen that it was a guaranteed victory." Sydney forwarded the email to her strategy team with instructions to begin preparation immediately. "Schedule our pitch presentation for next Thursday. I want our proposal to be absolutely flawless. Not good, not great, perfect." Her phone rang. Blocked number. Sydney answered it anyway, curious who else might be desperate enough to hide their identity. "You destroyed my life." Brielle's voice was shrill with panic and barely controlled hysteria. "Justin dumped me the day you froze the accounts. Just threw me away like garbage. He blamed me for everything. Said I ruined his marriage, destroyed his company, cost him his future. Do you know what it's like being cut off from that lifestyle? Do you know what you did to me?" Sydney leaned back in her leather chair, studying her manicured nails with detached interest. She'd had them done yesterday at an expensive salon, deep burgundy polish that looked like dried blood in certain light. "You knew he was married when you kissed him on that rooftop. You knew exactly what you were doing when you accepted those gifts and let him pay for your apartment. What did you think would happen when his wife found out?" "I thought he loved me. He said he was leaving you. He promised we'd be together once he figured out the financial details. He said you didn't understand him, that you were cold and focused on work, that he needed someone who made him feel alive." He lied. Men like Justin always lie when they're trying to justify betraying someone who trusted them. They lie to their wives about working late. They lie to their mistresses about leaving. They lie to themselves about what kind of people they are. Sydney's voice was clinical, detached, like she was discussing a case study instead of her destroyed marriage. "You just didn't matter enough for him to keep lying once the money stopped flowing. You were convenient, not essential. The second there were consequences, he chose survival over whatever fantasy he'd sold you. You can't just, 'Don't call me again, you're not my problem.' You never were. You were just a symptom of my husband's weakness and dishonesty. I don't blame you for destroying my marriage. I blame him for being stupid enough to risk everything for nothing." She hung up before Brielle could respond, blocked the number with efficient taps, then returned to reviewing the government contract requirements, putting the interruption completely out of her mind. That afternoon, Sydney met with TechWave's marketing team to review their brand positioning strategy for the upcoming quarter. They wanted to position the company as innovative and trustworthy, emphasizing their strong track record and impressive client satisfaction scores. Sydney had different ideas that made the room go quiet. "I want us to be known as the company that wins," she said, standing at the head of the conference table like a general addressing troops. "Not the company that's nice or friendly or collaborative, the company that delivers results and dominates markets. We're not here to make friends with our competitors. We're here to be so much better that competing with us becomes pointless." The team exchanged uncertain glances. "That's pretty aggressive messaging for our industry," the marketing director ventured. "Most firms emphasize partnership and most firms are mediocre. We're not." Sydney pulled up competitor analysis on the screen. "Our competitors should be afraid of us. Our clients should feel confident they made the only logical choice. Our industry should understand that TechWave sets the standard and everyone else scrambles to keep up. I don't want cautious. I want dominant. She worked until midnight that night, perfecting their pitch presentation for the government contract. TechWave had strong technical capabilities, but so did Justin's company, at least on paper. The difference would come down to execution, pricing strategy, presentation quality, and Sydney's willingness to play harder and smarter than Justin ever could. At 1 a.m., Sydney finally returned to her apartment, a modern loft in Midtown with exposed brick walls and stunning views of the city. She'd signed the lease the day after joining TechWave, chosen it specifically because it looked nothing like the home she'd shared with Justin. No memories here, no ghosts, just clean lines and empty spaces she could fill with whatever came next. She poured herself a glass of wine, an expensive Cabernet she'd bought just because she could, and stood at the window watching Atlanta's lights pulse like a heartbeat. Her phone vibrated with a text message. Justin's number, somehow getting through her blocks with a new workaround. I saw you at the investor conference today. You looked beautiful and powerful and completely unreachable. I'm so proud of what you've built in just 2 months. I know you hate me. I know I don't deserve your time or attention or forgiveness, but I still love you. I'll never stop fighting for us. I'll spend the rest of my life proving I can be the man you deserved from the beginning. Sydney deleted the message without responding. She'd seen him at the conference too, standing in the back of the ballroom during her keynote speech about aggressive growth strategies, watching her with those desperate eyes that used to make her feel loved. Now they just made her feel powerful, like evidence of her complete victory. The next morning, Sydney arrived at her office at 6 a.m. to find Devon waiting with a concerned expression that immediately put her on alert. "Justin's trying to poach our clients back," Devon said without preamble. "He's offering massive discounts, 30 to 40% below market rates, promising the world, basically operating at a loss just to survive. 2 of our smaller clients are considering switching back. They feel guilty about abandoning him." "Let them go," Sydney said without hesitation. "We don't need clients who make decisions based on guilt or price instead of value. We need clients who recognize excellence and are willing to pay for it. Any client who'd choose Justin's desperation over our results isn't worth fighting for." She pulled up their financial projections on her computer, running quick calculations. "How's our pitch preparation coming?" "Strong. Really strong. But Sydney, there's something you need to know." Devon paused, clearly uncomfortable. "Justin's going to be at the government pitch presentation next week. All 3 finalist companies present in the same room, back-to-back presentations. You're going to have to face him directly." "Perfect," Sydney said, her smile cold and satisfied. "I want him sitting in that room watching me take everything he thought was his. I want him to see exactly what he lost when he chose a rooftop kiss over our marriage. I want the memory of his failure to be connected to my success for the rest of his life." The pitch was scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m. at the Federal Building downtown. Sydney spent 70 hours preparing over the next 5 days, rehearsing every word until it was automatic, anticipating every possible question, building a presentation that would make their competitors look like amateurs playing in a professional league. On Wednesday night, Justin sent another message that somehow penetrated her blocks. "I know tomorrow is the pitch. I know what it means to both of us. I know you're going to be brilliant, and I'm going to lose everything. I just want you to know that, whatever happens, you deserve to win. You always were better than me at everything that mattered. I'm sorry I never told you that enough when we were together. I'm sorry for everything I took from you. I'm sorry for being too stupid and insecure to recognize what I had until it was gone. Good luck tomorrow. I mean that sincerely." Sydney read the message 3 times in her empty apartment, felt something crack in her chest, like ice shifting on a frozen lake. Then she remembered the rooftop, the locked door, the darkness, the betrayal captured in 30 seconds of observation that had destroyed 7 years of history. The crack sealed itself over with something harder than ice. She fell asleep that night thinking about victory, about crushing Justin's last hope, about standing over the ruins of everything he'd built, and knowing she'd done it with her own hands, her own intelligence, her own refusal to be destroyed by his weakness. Tomorrow would be her coronation, and Justin would be there in the audience, watching his execution dressed as a pitch presentation. Chapter 4. The Takeover. The federal building's conference room felt like a courtroom, and Sydney Young intended to deliver the verdict that would end everything. She sat in the front row between Devon and her chief technical officer, watching the first competitor, a smaller firm from Charlotte, present their pitch with nervous energy. Generic slides using stock photos and template designs, rehearsed talking points that sounded identical to every other corporate presentation, promises they probably couldn't keep, and innovations they definitely couldn't deliver. Nothing memorable. Nothing that would make the procurement officers lean forward instead of checking their phones. They'd be eliminated by lunch. Sydney had known it the moment they introduced themselves with apologetic smiles. Justin's company presented second. Sydney watched him walk to the podium, noticing details that would have escaped most observers. His suit hung looser than it used to, expensive fabric bunching at the shoulders where he'd lost weight. His hands shook slightly as he advanced the first slide, the remote control trembling enough to be visible from 15 feet away. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, skin pale in the harsh fluorescent lighting. He'd aged a decade in 2 months. Good. His pitch was desperate from the opening line. Too many promises without supporting evidence, too little substance beneath the polished words. Prices cut so drastically low that even the government procurement officers, people accustomed to aggressive bids, looked skeptical and exchanged worried glances. They could smell desperation, and it made them uncomfortable. Justin's voice cracked twice during the 20-minute presentation, once when discussing their development timeline, once when explaining their quality assurance process. He made eye contact with Sydney during a transition between slides, just for a second, and she saw everything compressed into that glance: grief, regret, pleading, love, desperation, surrender. She stared back with absolute emptiness in her eyes, her face revealing nothing, and watched something fundamental in him shatter. He finished to polite applause that echoed hollowly in the conference room, gathered his materials with hands that couldn't quite stay steady, walked back to his seat without looking at Sydney again, his shoulders hunched forward like a man carrying weight that was slowly crushing him. Then it was Sydney's turn to perform the execution. She stood with fluid grace, smoothed her navy Armani suit that fit perfectly because she'd had it custom-tailored last week, and walked to the podium like she owned not just the room but the entire building, because in this moment, she did. She owned this decision. She owned this outcome. She owned Justin's destruction. Good afternoon. I'm Sydney Young, Chief Executive Officer of TechWave Solutions. We're not here to make promises about what we might do. We're here to show you documentation of what we've already accomplished. For the next 45 minutes, Sydney delivered a masterpiece that made everything before it look like amateur hour. Real case studies with specific metrics and measurable outcomes, concrete data instead of aspirational language, live demonstrations of their technology actually working instead of simulated mock-ups. She answered every technical question without hesitation, addressed every budgetary concern with detailed financial models, and made the government's choice obvious. TechWave wasn't just the best option. They were the only rational choice. The procurement panel asked to deliberate. Sydney returned to her seat, feeling Justin's eyes on her back like heat from a dying fire that couldn't quite burn out completely. During the 15-minute break, he approached her in the hallway outside the conference room, where people milled around the coffee station and bathrooms. Devon stepped between them immediately with protective instinct, but Sydney waved him off with a subtle hand gesture. She could handle Justin herself. She'd been handling him since the moment she locked that rooftop door. "You were brilliant in there," Justin said quietly, his voice rough with emotion he was trying to control. "Absolutely brilliant. I never knew you had that level of command presence. I never saw you present like that before, so confident and powerful and unstoppable. You've changed. You never asked. You never wanted to know what I was capable of because it might have threatened your fragile ego. You were too busy spending my money on another woman to pay attention to who I actually was. Sydney, please. I know I don't deserve anything from you. I know what I did was unforgivable. I destroyed something precious because I was weak and stupid and terrified of my own inadequacy. But watching you in there, seeing what you've become in just 2 months. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry I wasn't the man who helped you get there. I'm so sorry I held you back when I should have been pushing you forward. You didn't hold me back, Justin. That's what you don't understand. Sydney's voice was flat, factual, delivering truth without mercy. You were just nothing, not help, not hindrance, just neutral weight I carried without realizing I could put you down. You were mediocre, and I mistook it for potential. You were selfish, and I mistook it for ambition. You were a coward who avoided difficult growth, and I mistook it for someone worth building a life beside. I deserve that. I deserve all of it and worse. Justin's eyes filled with tears that he didn't try to hide. But I'm begging you, if there's any part of you that remembers what we had before I destroyed it. What we had was a lie. You made sure of that when you kissed her on our rooftop, when you stole from our company to buy her gifts, when you chose weakness over integrity every single day for months. You turned our entire marriage into fiction. Sydney, wait, please. Justin grabbed her arm gently, then immediately released it when she flinched away. The company's going under. I've laid off 40% of my staff, good people with families who depended on me. I'm going to lose everything in the next 60 days. If you win this contract today, I'm done. Completely done. No recovery, no rebuilding, just finished. She looked back at him, studying his face with clinical detachment, searching for any trace of the man she'd married 7 years ago at that small ceremony in her parents' backyard. All she saw was a stranger who'd stolen years of her life and spent them on betrayal. Then I guess you should have thought about that before you destroyed us, Sydney said. You should have considered permanent consequences before making temporary choices. You should have valued what you had before you threw it away for nothing. The procurement panel returned 20 minutes later with their decision. Sydney knew what they'd say before they spoke. She'd seen it in their faces during the presentations, in the way they'd leaned forward during her demonstration, in the questions they'd asked that showed genuine engagement instead of polite obligation. TechWave Solutions had won the $50 million contract. 5 years of guaranteed revenue, industry credibility, platform to expand nationally. Sydney accepted with gracious professionalism, shook hands with the officials while photographers documented the moment, thanked her team for their excellent preparation, and never once looked at Justin as he gathered his things like a ghost, collecting remnants of existence, and left the room with slow, defeated steps. That night, TechWave threw a celebration at an upscale restaurant downtown, steaks and champagne and toasts to their success. Sydney gave a speech thanking her team for their dedication and talent, raised her glass to future victories, and excused herself at 9 p.m. when the party was still building momentum. She wanted to be alone with her triumph, except victory felt hollow. She sat in her loft at midnight staring at the signed contract documents spread across her dining table and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no joy, no sense of accomplishment, just emptiness where something vital used to live, like a space where an organ had been removed, but the body kept functioning anyway. Her phone buzzed with a text from Devon. 3 creditors just contacted me. They're about to foreclose on Justin's company. He's got maybe 2 weeks before involuntary bankruptcy. Thought you should know. Also, are you okay? You left the party early. Sydney stared at the message for a long time, watching the cursor blink on her screen. 2 weeks until complete destruction. She'd won so thoroughly that Justin would lose everything, his company, his reputation, his future, any possibility of recovery. She should feel satisfied. She'd earned this victory. She'd worked for it, planned for it, executed it perfectly. This was justice. This was consequences. This was what betrayal cost. So why did it feel like she'd lost something too? Sydney made a decision that would change the trajectory of everything. She called her investment broker, a man named Richard who'd handled her grandmother's estate, and never asked unnecessary questions. "I want to buy outstanding debts," she said without preamble. "Business loans held by 3 specific creditors against a company called Gaffney Technologies. How fast can you move if I give you unlimited budget? If the creditors are willing to sell, which they usually are when loans go bad, 24 to 48 hours max. Buy them. All of them. I don't care what it costs. Pay premium if necessary. Just get me controlling position." By Friday afternoon, Sydney owned 70% of Justin's company's debt through a shell corporation Richard had set up, which meant she effectively controlled Justin's company. She could dissolve it, absorb it, restructure it, or let it die slowly while she watched. The choice was entirely hers. She called an emergency board meeting for Monday morning, sent formal notices to all stakeholders, invited Justin as a legal courtesy since he was still technically the founder and CEO, though those titles would be meaningless in about 48 hours. Monday arrived with cold rain hammering against windows like judgment. Justin walked into the TechWave conference room looking like a man attending his own execution. He wore the same suit from the pitch presentation, probably one of only 2 he still owned. He sat in the corner quietly, waiting for the inevitable. "Gentlemen," Sydney began once everyone had assembled, her voice crisp and professional. "I've acquired controlling debt position in Gaffney Technologies through a private investment vehicle. I'm exercising my legal right to force immediate restructuring. The company will be dissolved effective immediately, all patents and intellectual property transferred to TechWave Solutions for debt satisfaction, and all remaining assets liquidated to satisfy outstanding obligations to creditors. I'll need a vote from this board to authorize the acquisition and integration. Unanimous in favor. Not even discussion necessary, just hands raised and the formality of recording votes." Justin sat in the corner throughout the entire proceeding, silent and grey-faced. When it was over and people filed out discussing integration timelines and asset valuations, he remained seated, staring at nothing. "Mr. Gaffney," Sydney said coldly, gathering her materials, "you're officially out of business. Please vacate your office by end of day. Security will escort you to collect personal items." She walked out without looking back, feeling his devastation follow her like smoke from extinguished fire. That night, Justin sent her a 14-page letter. Sydney almost threw it away like all the others, but something, maybe curiosity, maybe cruelty, maybe some buried piece of who she used to be, made her read it instead. He'd written about everything with devastating honesty: the affair, his crushing insecurity, his jealousy of her competence, his fear that she'd outgrow him and discover she deserved better, his stupid, catastrophic mistake of seeking validation from someone who didn't know him, didn't challenge him, didn't make him want to be better. He took responsibility for every lie, every betrayal, every moment he'd chosen cowardice over courage. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just wanted her to know that losing her had finally taught him what she'd been worth, and he'd spend the rest of his life knowing he'd destroyed the only real thing he'd ever had. Sydney read it twice, filed it in the drawer with all the others, and went to bed wondering why breaking him completely hadn't fixed whatever was broken in her. 6 months later, Forbes magazine called requesting an interview and cover photo shoot. They wanted to feature her as tech's most ruthless CEO. The article would profile her meteoric rise, her aggressive business tactics, her complete destruction of her ex-husband's competing firm. Sydney agreed to everything: the interview, the photo shoot, the celebration of her empire built on ashes. When the magazine hit newsstands on a Thursday morning, Justin saw it at a gas station while buying coffee in his 15-year-old Honda Civic. He bought every copy they had, brought them home to his studio apartment, laid them across his mattress on the floor, and wept for everything he'd destroyed. Sydney never knew about Justin's breakdown. She was too busy being powerful and successful and empty to notice that destroying him had cost her something she'd never get back. Chapter 5. The Dissolution. Sydney signed the dissolution paperwork on a Tuesday morning in late November while rain hammered against her office windows like judgment trying to penetrate glass and steel. Gaffney Technologies ceases to exist as of 9 a.m. today. her lawyer confirmed, sliding the final documents across her desk with efficient movements. All patents, client lists, and proprietary technology now belong to TechWave. All outstanding debts are satisfied through asset liquidation. Mr. Gaffney has no legal claim to any intellectual property developed during the company's operational period. It's complete and final. What about his personal assets? Sydney asked, signing her name on the final pages with decisive strokes. His house went into foreclosure last month. Fifth Third Bank took possession 2 weeks ago, and it's already listed with a realtor. His car was repossessed in early October. His investment accounts were liquidated to satisfy creditor claims. He's essentially broke, Sydney. Everything except basic personal effects and furniture worth maybe $3,000 total. He's living in a studio apartment in a neighborhood that, the lawyer paused delicately. Let's just say it's a dramatic fall from the penthouse you shared. Sydney signed her name one final time, her signature decisive and clean. Justin was erased. The company they'd built together with her grandmother's inheritance, the business he'd poisoned with his betrayal, was now legally and completely hers. She owned every line of code, every client relationship, every innovation. He owned nothing except the consequences of his choices. There's one more thing, her lawyer added, pulling out his phone. Brielle Hoffman has been trying to reach you. She's contacted our office 4 times this week, increasingly desperate. My paralegal finally took her information. Block her number. I'm not interested in whatever she wants. She claims it's urgent. Something about pregnancy. She says she needs to speak with you directly about Justin's child. Sydney looked up sharply, feeling something cold slide down her spine. Schedule a meeting tomorrow. But I'll handle this myself. Don't acknowledge her claims or engage with the substance. Just get her in a room with me. Brielle arrived at TechWave's offices the next morning wearing designer clothes that no longer fit quite right, clothes from when Justin was paying for everything. The Chanel jacket gaped slightly at the shoulders. The Louboutin heels were scuffed at the back. Her confidence had been replaced with barely concealed desperation that made her movements jerky and uncertain. Sydney met her in a conference room with glass walls where the entire office could see them, but no one could hear. Visibility without vulnerability. She wanted witnesses if this conversation went wrong. "Thank you for seeing me," Brielle began, her hands twisting in her lap with nervous energy. "I know you hate me. You have every right to hate me. But I need your help desperately, and you're the only person who might understand the situation I'm in." "I'm not interested in your problems," Sydney said flatly, her posture perfect and her expression revealing nothing. "I'm pregnant with Justin's baby. 3 months along. I found out right before everything collapsed, before you destroyed him financially, and he dumped me like garbage." Brielle's voice rose with emotion. "I need money to go away quietly. $500,000. If you don't pay me, I'll go public with everything. I'll tell the media that you're the reason Justin's child will grow up without a father. I'll tell them you're vindictive and cruel and destroyed a family." "You're lying," Sydney interrupted, her voice flat and factual. "Try again, but this time tell me what you really want." Brielle's face flushed red. "I'm not lying. You're lying because I did my homework on you before agreeing to this meeting." Sydney pulled out her phone and opened a file her private investigator had prepared overnight. The man was expensive but thorough. "In the past 2 years, you've attempted this exact scam on 3 different men in 3 different cities. Michael Rodriguez in Boston paid you $80,000 before discovering you were never pregnant, and the medical records you'd shown him were forgeries. Chen Davidson in Chicago was smart enough to demand independent medical verification you couldn't provide. Thomas Williams in New York actually called your bluff and forced you to admit fraud on video recording that he threatened to give to police." She turned the phone screen toward Brielle, showing photos and documentation that made the other woman's face go white. "You're not pregnant. You're desperate. You chose the wrong targets, men who were either gullible or too embarrassed to prosecute. But I'm neither of those things. And you're about to make the biggest mistake of your life if you don't walk away right now." "How did you—" Brielle's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm better at this than you are. I'm better at this than anyone you've ever tried to manipulate. I don't just react. I investigate. I prepare. I document everything. And right now, I have enough evidence to have you arrested for extortion and fraud across multiple states." Sydney's voice was calm but absolutely certain. "My lawyer is filing a cease and desist order this afternoon, along with a detailed police report documenting your pattern of fraud. If you contact me, Justin, or anyone associated with my company ever again, you'll be arrested immediately. If you stay in Atlanta, you'll be prosecuted. I suggest you leave the state by the end of the week." "You can't do this to me. You can't just—" "I already did. Security will escort you out now. Don't come back." Two security guards appeared at the conference room door like they'd been waiting for a signal. Brielle left cursing and crying and making threats, her voice dissolving into pleading as the elevator doors closed on her desperate face. Sydney watched her go without any emotion except mild satisfaction that another loose end had been tied. She returned to her office and felt absolutely nothing. Not vindication, not triumph, just the same cold emptiness that had been expanding in her chest for months, like a slow leak draining something essential. That afternoon, a courier delivered another letter from Justin, the 14th he'd sent since the dissolution. Sydney almost threw it away without opening it. That had become her routine, but something about the handwriting looked different, shakier, less careful. She opened it. "Sydney," it began, "I know you don't read these anymore. I know you probably throw them away without looking at them. But I need to write them anyway. Not for you, for me. Because putting words on paper is the only way I can process what I've become and what I'm trying to build from the ruins. I saw the Forbes magazine today at a gas station. You looked powerful and beautiful and completely unreachable. Like a woman who conquered the world after someone tried to destroy her. I'm so proud of you. I'm so ashamed of me. I don't ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I don't expect you to respond because you shouldn't. I just want you to know that I understand now. I understand what I had. I understand what I lost. I understand that some mistakes are so catastrophic that they can never be fixed, only lived with. I'm learning to live with mine. I hope someday you'll find peace with yours, whatever that looks like. Even if it means never thinking of me again. That would be fair. That would be what I earned. Love always, Justin." Sydney read it 3 times, feeling something crack in her chest each time. Then she filed it in the drawer with all the others and forced herself back to work, drowning the feeling in spreadsheets and strategic planning. 6 months passed like water through fingers. Sydney's empire expanded to 3 states, with offices in Atlanta, Charlotte, and Nashville. Her net worth hit $15 million on paper. She hired 400 employees and developed a reputation for ruthless efficiency that made competitors nervous and clients confident. She dated occasionally, successful men who looked perfect in photos and felt hollow in person. She worked 70-hour weeks and slept in her office more often than her apartment, waking up on her leather couch with her laptop still open. Then Forbes called again. This time, they wanted her for their annual 40 Under 40 issue, featuring business leaders who were reshaping industries. They sent a photographer to her office for a full-day shoot, had her pose in power suits against Atlanta's skyline, and wrote glowing copy about her meteoric rise from silent investor to industry titan in less than 18 months. The magazine hit stands on a Thursday in October, exactly 2 years and 3 months after Sydney locked that rooftop door. Justin saw it at a gas station while driving home from his sales job. He'd stopped to buy coffee because he couldn't afford the expensive machine he used to own, couldn't justify spending $8 on a latte when he was eating rice and beans for dinner. The magazine sat in the rack beside the register with Sydney's face staring back at him from the glossy cover, beautiful and cold and victorious. He bought it with shaking hands, paid with crumpled bills from his wallet, sat in his 15-year-old Honda Civic in the gas station parking lot reading the article 3 times, learned that she'd built a $50 million company from the ashes of his failure, learned that she was being courted by venture capitalists and Fortune 500 boards for positions that would make her even more successful. learned that she'd become everything he'd prevented her from being when she was married to him. Justin drove back to his studio apartment in a building with broken elevator and flickering lights in hallways that smelled like old cooking and disappointment. He climbed 4 flights of stairs because the elevator hadn't worked in 3 weeks, opened the door to his 480-square-foot space containing a mattress on the floor, a folding chair from Goodwill, and a desk made from milk crates and plywood. He laid the magazine on his mattress, stared at Sydney's face for 20 minutes, memorizing every detail of her success. Then he collapsed onto the floor and wept like something essential had finally broken inside him beyond any possibility of repair. Above him, his neighbor's baby cried through walls so thin he could hear every sound. Outside, sirens wailed past windows that didn't fully close, letting in cold air and city noise. His phone sat on the milk crate desk, silent because no one called anymore. His calendar showed nothing but work shifts and therapy appointments. Justin had lost everything worth having: his business, his money, his reputation, his marriage, his future, his dignity. He'd traded it all for a moment of weakness on a rooftop, and now he was living in the ruins of his own making with no path forward except learning to be someone different in the wreckage. Sydney had destroyed him so completely that nothing remained except the man he should have been all along. And somewhere in Atlanta, in a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and original art on exposed brick walls, Sydney stared at the same magazine and felt absolutely nothing except the hollow certainty that revenge had cost her something she couldn't name but couldn't stop missing. Chapter 6. The Persistence. Justin Gaffney woke up at 5:30 a.m. in his studio apartment to the sound of his neighbor's baby screaming through walls thin as paper. He rolled off the mattress on the floor, careful to avoid the spot where the frame had collapsed 3 months ago. His apartment was 480 square feet of everything he'd lost: 1 folding chair from Goodwill, a desk made from milk crates and plywood, a microwave on a mini fridge that hummed constantly, 2 pots for rice and beans, $3 store plates, utensils from a fast food restaurant. The bathroom mirror showed a stranger. He'd lost 38 pounds since the dissolution. His designer clothes sold months ago for $400. Now he wore Target clearance and thrift store finds. His last professional haircut was 8 months ago. Now he cut his own hair with scissors and YouTube tutorials. Justin's phone alarm buzzed. Therapy time. He'd been going 3 times a week for 18 months, walking 40 minutes each way because bus fare would cost $200 monthly he couldn't spare. Dr. Martinez had been patient, helping him understand the patterns that led to his catastrophic choices. "You've made significant progress," Dr. Martinez said today, "but I'm concerned you're still punishing yourself excessively. When will you allow yourself to move forward?" "When I've earned it," Justin said steadily. "I destroyed a good woman's life because I was weak and selfish. I don't get to move forward until I've proven I'm different." "And how will you know when you've proven that?" "When being honest is automatic instead of effortful, when I've rebuilt my character from foundation up instead of just painting over rot." After therapy, Justin walked to his job at a struggling startup selling cloud infrastructure. He made $42,000 annually, barely covering rent, food, therapy, and necessities. He used to spend more than that on watches. Now he owned 1 Timex from Target for $18. His co-workers knew nothing about his past. He was just Justin from sales, quiet, competent, reliable. He ate lunch at his desk, saved every extra dollar, never talked about his personal life. But every Saturday, Justin did something he'd been doing for 6 months. He sat on a bench across from Sydney's office building for 12 hours straight. He didn't approach, didn't call, didn't try to talk to her. He just sat there with a library book, reading and waiting, hoping she might see him and know he hadn't given up on becoming someone worthy of the chance he'd destroyed. After work, Justin volunteered at a homeless shelter overnight 3 times weekly. He served food, cleaned bathrooms, helped men check in, and sat with people who needed someone to listen. "You get it," one regular told him. "Most volunteers look at us like problems. You look at us like people who made mistakes." "We all make mistakes," Justin said quietly. "Some of us just had further to fall." At midnight, he returned to his apartment and pulled out the shoebox under his mattress. Inside were his luxury watches, 8 timepieces worth $83,000 total, the last remnants of his former life. He'd kept them thinking maybe he'd need them as emergency funds. But tonight, seeing Sydney's Forbes cover had crystallized something. These watches represented the man who'd destroyed his marriage, purchased with ego, worn with arrogance, kept as trophies of unearned status. They needed to go. Justin spent 3 hours researching women's entrepreneurship funds. He found one in Atlanta providing microloans and mentorship to women starting businesses, exactly what Sydney would have loved. He called them the next morning. "I'd like to donate luxury watches worth about $83,000 for auction, all proceeds to your loan program." "That's incredibly generous. Can we list you as a donor?" "No, make it anonymous. But send a letter to Sydney Young at TechWave Solutions saying a donation was made in her name." He boxed up every watch: Rolex, Omega, Patek Philippe, Tag Heuer. Each had a memory. The Rolex after his first major client, the Omega Sydney gave him for their 5th anniversary, the Patek Philippe he'd worn kissing Brielle on the rooftop. Justin shipped them all without looking back. For 2 weeks after, he ate only rice and beans because he'd spent grocery money on shipping. He walked an extra hour to work to save bus fare. He wore the same 3 shirts, hoping no one noticed. Then Sydney's assistant called. Ms. Young received a letter from the Women's Entrepreneurship Fund about an anonymous donation in her name. "Do you know anything about that?" Justin's heart hammered. "Yes. She wanted me to ask why. Because she deserves to be honored. Because her success should help other women succeed. Because I spent too many years taking from her, and it's time I gave something back, even if she never knows it came from me." Silence. Then, "She said to tell you thank you." 3 words, first communication in 18 months. Justin sat on his apartment floor and cried. He continued writing monthly letters, not begging, not apologizing endlessly, just honest updates on his therapy insights, volunteer stories, moments of clarity about who he'd been versus who he was becoming. He never asked for anything, never requested meetings or second chances. He just documented his transformation, even if she never read a word. His Saturday vigils continued through all weather, rain, cold, heat. He sat on that bench from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every Saturday, reading and waiting. Security questioned him twice, but eventually left him alone. He'd been doing this for 8 months when Sydney's assistant approached him on a Saturday in March. "She knows you're here," the assistant said. "She's always known. She watches from her office sometimes." Justin looked up at TechWave's building, at Sydney's corner office. He couldn't see her, but knowing she could see him felt like something breaking open in his chest. "Why are you here every week?" the assistant asked. "What does this accomplish?" "Nothing," Justin said honestly. "Except showing her I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to prove I've changed, even if she never believes me, even if I sit here every Saturday for the rest of my life, and it doesn't matter." The assistant studied him. "You look different than your pictures, thinner, older." "I feel different. I am different. Everything that made me the person in those pictures had to be burned away. This is what's left. This is the foundation I'm building on." "She says you should stop wasting your Saturdays." "Tell her they're not wasted. Tell her I'll sit here every week until she's ready to talk, or until I die, whichever comes first." The assistant walked away. Justin opened his book and continued reading, knowing Sydney was watching from above, wondering if persistence could ever undo betrayal, or if some mistakes were too fundamental to forgive. He'd find out eventually. Until then, he'd keep showing up, keep becoming better, keep hoping that someday the woman he'd destroyed might see something worth saving in the man he'd become. Chapter 7. The Crack. Sydney Young woke at 4 a.m. in her luxury penthouse, stared at the ceiling for 15 minutes while her alarm waited to go off, and felt absolutely nothing except the hollow certainty that this was her life now. This had become her routine. Wake before dawn to anxiety she couldn't name. Lie in expensive sheets in a bed too large for one person, feeling empty. Force herself to shower and dress and construct the mask of powerful CEO she wore for the world. Arrive at her office by 6 a.m. and work until exhaustion made her forget she felt nothing. TechWave Solutions now operated in 3 states, with 400 employees depending on her decisions. Her personal net worth had hit $15 million, according to her last quarterly financial review. She had offices in Atlanta, Charlotte, and Nashville, with plans drawn up for expansion to Dallas and Denver pending board approval. Her calendar was booked solid 8 weeks out with board meetings, investor pitches, keynote speeches, and award ceremonies celebrating her ruthless efficiency and meteoric rise. She'd won, completely, devastatingly, permanently. She'd destroyed Justin's company, built an empire from his ashes, and proven beyond any doubt that she never needed him at all. So why did victory feel like dying by degrees? Sydney walked to her floor-to-ceiling windows and watched Atlanta wake up beneath her. Lights flickering on in apartments where people presumably slept beside people they loved, couples jogging together in Piedmont Park with matching strides and easy companionship, a man walking his dog while drinking coffee from a travel mug, laughing at something on his phone, looking genuinely happy about starting his day. She owned this view, this penthouse that cost $8,000 a month. This life spread out before her like proof of success, and it all felt like borrowed furniture in someone else's house, like she was playing a role in a story about a powerful woman instead of actually being one. Her phone buzzed with calendar reminders stacking up. 7 a.m. breakfast meeting with venture capitalists who wanted to discuss Series B funding, 9 a.m. strategy session with her executive team, 11 a.m. conference call with board members about the Nashville expansion, lunch meeting with potential Fortune 500 clients, 2 p.m. photo shoot for Business Insider's Women Reshaping Tech feature, 4 p.m. keynote address at the Women in Tech Summit, dinner meeting at 7 p.m. with investors, drinks with competitors turned potential partners at 9 p.m. Another 16-hour day, another performance of being the woman everyone expected. Another night returning to this empty penthouse, wondering what exactly she'd won that felt worth having. Sydney's dating life had become a series of expensive dinners with men who looked perfect on paper but felt hollow in execution. Last week she'd walked out mid-appetizer when her date, a successful venture capitalist, had spent 20 minutes explaining blockchain technology she'd already mastered years ago, talking to her like she was a pretty face who needed education instead of a CEO who'd probably forgotten more about tech than he'd ever learn. The week before, she'd ended a third date with a different investor because his conversation was so performatively boring she'd considered faking a medical emergency just to escape. He'd talked about his portfolio companies and his yacht and his vacation home in the Hamptons while she'd sat there calculating how soon she could leave without being outright rude. None of them felt real. They were all playing roles. The successful man, the accomplished woman, the power couple destined for magazine features and charity galas. But Sydney could see through the performance now because she was performing too. She'd become so good at spotting lies, in herself, in others, that she couldn't ignore them anymore, couldn't pretend casual relationships were anything but mutual using. She missed something she couldn't articulate. Not Justin, not the marriage, something deeper and more essential. The feeling of being known completely and loved anyway. The certainty that someone saw her worst self and stayed. The comfort of shared history and inside jokes and knowing glances across crowded rooms that said, "We're in this together." She'd destroyed all of that on purpose, with deliberate precision. And now she was living in the victory she'd built, and victory tasted like ashes. Sydney arrived at her office at 6:15 a.m. Her assistant Tasha had already made coffee exactly how Sydney liked it and laid out the morning briefing. 3 new client acquisitions worth $2.3 million in combined annual revenue, media requests from Forbes and Bloomberg requesting interviews, and a note at the bottom. Justin has been on his bench since 6 a.m. Security asked if they should remove him. I told them no per your standing instructions. Sydney walked to her window and looked down. There he was. Same bench. Same position. Reading a book like he had nowhere else to be and nothing else to prove. He'd been doing this every Saturday for 8 months now, showing up regardless of weather or hope or any indication she cared. Security had questioned him multiple times. Her staff had offered to ban him from the area. Sydney had refused every suggestion, giving no explanation except that he wasn't bothering anyone. Some part of her wanted him there, needed the visible evidence of his transformation, or maybe just needed to know that someone was still fighting for her, even if she'd never let him win. Maybe she needed the reminder that her destruction had been thorough enough to humble someone completely. Her assistant knocked. "Your breakfast meeting's here, Ms. Young. 3 partners from Avalon Ventures in the small conference room." Sydney turned away from the window. "Send them in." The day unfolded like every other day, in an endless series of identical days, meetings where she made smart decisions, presentations where she impressed important people, conversations where she said the right things with the right tone. Everyone saw the powerful CEO crushing her industry. No one saw the woman who'd forgotten how to feel anything except tired. By 6 p.m. she'd been awake for 14 hours and accomplished everything on her list, and felt nothing except the same gnawing emptiness that had been expanding in her chest for 2 years like internal erosion. Sydney cancelled her dinner meeting, told Tasha she was sick and going home early, drove to her penthouse alone and arrived at 7 p.m. with a $90 bottle of wine and no plan except to stop pretending she was okay. She sat on her couch in the dark, the city lights coming through her windows painting everything in shades of loneliness. She pulled out the drawer where she kept Justin's letters. There were 43 now, written monthly for 18 months. She'd never read most of them. Reading them felt dangerous, like acknowledging he still existed might crack something essential in her carefully constructed armor. But tonight Sydney couldn't maintain the performance. Tonight she needed to understand what she'd actually destroyed when she'd locked that rooftop door. She read them all, chronologically, starting with the desperate early letters full of begging and empty apologies, progressing to the middle ones where he started taking real accountability, arriving at the recent ones full of therapy insights and genuine transformation. The final letter, dated 2 weeks ago, talked about volunteering at the homeless shelter and recognizing himself in men who'd lost everything. "I don't ask for forgiveness," he'd written in his careful handwriting. "I ask to keep documenting this journey for you because I need you to know that destroying my life was the greatest gift you ever gave me. It forced me to see who I'd become. It gave me the chance to build someone better from absolute zero. Even if you never speak to me again, I want you to know that losing you taught me what you were worth. And I was so catastrophically blind, Sydney. So willfully blind to what I had because facing your competence meant confronting my inadequacy." Sydney read that line 3 times. Then she poured more wine and cried for the first time in 2 years, sitting alone on her expensive couch in her empty penthouse. Not because she missed Justin, not because she wanted him back, but because she'd spent so much energy destroying him that she'd destroyed something essential in herself. She'd become powerful and cold and efficient at achieving goals. She'd won every battle, but somewhere along the way, she'd lost the ability to feel anything except empty, like revenge had hollowed her out from inside. Sydney's phone rang, interrupting her breakdown. Her best friend Keisha calling for their weekly check-in that Sydney had been avoiding for 2 months. "How are you?" Keisha asked when Sydney finally answered. "Fine. Busy. The Charlotte office exceeded targets this quarter. We're about to close a huge deal with—" "Sydney, stop. How are you really? And don't give me business metrics. I want to know about you." Silence. Long and honest and terrifying. "I don't know," Sydney finally admitted, her voice cracking. "I don't know how I am anymore. I don't know who I am without revenge defining me. Come meet me, right now. Drop everything and meet me." They met at a quiet wine bar in Virginia Highland within 30 minutes. Keisha took one look at Sydney's face and ordered an entire bottle of wine before they'd even sat down. "You look like you're dying," Keisha said bluntly, with the kind of honesty only real friends can deliver. When's the last time you felt actually happy? And don't say work accomplishments or business wins. I mean happy, joyful, alive, human. I don't remember. You destroyed him. You won completely. You have everything you said you wanted. Keisha leaned forward, her voice soft but relentless. So why do you look like you're dying inside? What was it all for, Sydney? What did you actually win? Sydney's carefully constructed facade cracked like ice under pressure. I don't know. I thought revenge would fix something broken. I thought winning would make me feel powerful and validated. But Keisha, I built an empire to prove I didn't need him, and all I proved is that I'm really good at being alone. I'm excellent at being empty. I've perfected the art of winning while losing everything that actually matters. You're not just alone. You're isolated. You've turned yourself into a fortress, and fortresses don't feel joy. They just stand there protecting nothing while everything real stays outside the walls. What am I supposed to do? Forgive him? Pretend what he did didn't matter? Act like betrayal can be undone if someone feels sorry enough? I'm not saying forgive him. I'm not even saying talk to him. Keisha reached across the table and took Sydney's hand. I'm saying maybe let yourself feel something other than victorious and empty, because this version of you, she's successful and powerful and completely dead inside. This isn't living. This is just winning very, very slowly. Sydney drove home at midnight, Keisha's words echoing in her mind like uncomfortable truth. She stopped at a red light 3 blocks from Justin's bench, and on impulse, or maybe desperation, turned toward it instead of toward her penthouse. He was still there, after midnight on a Saturday, sitting on that bench with a book and a thermos of coffee like he had all the time in the world and nowhere more important to be. Sydney parked across the street and watched him for the first time in months. Really watched him instead of just glancing from her office window. He looked different, thinner, older, worn down by consequences, but there was something in his posture, a quiet peace she didn't understand, that looked like he'd made peace with loss instead of fighting it. He was reading a book about emotional intelligence, making notes in the margins with a pen, completely absorbed. He never looked up, never checked his phone, just read and existed and waited for something he had no guarantee would ever come. Something in Sydney's chest cracked. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not even sympathy, but acknowledgement that maybe destroying him hadn't fixed what was broken in her. Maybe revenge had just created 2 broken people instead of 1. Maybe she'd won every battle while losing the war against her own emptiness. She drove home without approaching him, poured another glass of wine, sat at her desk in the dark and wrote something she never thought she'd write. Justin, I've read every letter you sent. I've watched you sit on that bench every Saturday for months. I've seen the donation you made in my name. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with any of this. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you did. But I'm tired of pretending that destroying you fixed anything. I'm tired of being the woman you turned me into through your betrayal and my revenge. So here's my condition. You have 6 more months to prove your change is real. Not with letters or donations or Saturday vigils, with actions I'll be watching but you won't see coming. If you pass, maybe we talk. If you fail, you never contact me again. Those are the terms. Take them or leave them. She sealed the letter in an envelope, addressed it to his apartment in handwriting that looked shakier than she expected, and mailed it the next morning before she could change her mind. Then Sydney went to work and waited to see if the man she'd destroyed could prove he'd become someone worth rebuilding beside. Chapter 8. The Test. Justin received Sydney's letter on a Tuesday morning and read it 17 times before his hands stopped shaking enough to set it down. 6 months of tests, actions he wouldn't see coming, the possibility of a conversation if he proved himself worthy. It was more than he'd hoped for in 2 years of letters and vigils and transformation. It was everything. He had no idea what the tests would be, no way to prepare or strategize. No option except to keep being the man he'd spent 18 months building from ruins and hope that authentic change would be visible enough to pass whatever invisible scrutiny she applied. The first test arrived exactly 1 week later with devastating precision. A lawyer showed up at Justin's studio apartment on a Tuesday evening, knocking on his door with firm, professional raps. Justin opened it to find a man in an expensive suit holding a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Justin's monthly rent. "Mr. Gaffney, I'm William Bradford from Bradford and Associates. I represent an anonymous client interested in resolving your past business dealings with Ms. Sydney Young in a manner beneficial to all parties." The lawyer handed Justin an envelope containing legal documents and a cashier's check that made Justin's breath stop in his throat. $250,000 made out to him, real and official and life-changing. "This settlement offers you complete financial compensation for any claims you might have regarding the dissolution of Gaffney Technologies," the lawyer explained in smooth, practiced tones. "In exchange, you agree to never contact Ms. Young again under any circumstances, to sign away all rights to any shared intellectual property developed during your marriage or business partnership, and to relocate outside of Georgia within 60 days. The offer is generous, Mr. Gaffney. Life-changing, really." Justin stared at the check. $250,000. Enough to restart his entire life. Buy a decent car. Get an apartment in a building where things worked. Stop eating rice and beans for every meal. Stop walking miles to save bus fare. Stop wearing thrift store clothes and cutting his own hair in broken mirrors. Enough to escape the consequences of his choices and begin fresh somewhere else, where no one knew his failures or his shame. "Who's offering this?" Justin asked, though he already knew the answer. "My client must remain anonymous per the terms of engagement, but I can tell you the offer expires in 48 hours. After that window closes, it's permanently off the table." The lawyer set the envelope on Justin's milk crate desk. "Think about it carefully, Mr. Gaffney. This is your chance to move forward." The lawyer left. Justin sat on his mattress on the floor, holding the check, feeling the weight of temptation and redemption balanced in his trembling hands. He thought about therapy, about Dr. Martinez asking him what kind of man he wanted to become, about homeless shelter guys who'd told him that real change meant doing the right thing even when no one was watching, especially when doing the wrong thing would be so much easier. About Sydney, somewhere in her corner office, watching to see if he'd take the easy way out or choose integrity when it cost him everything. Justin pulled out paper and wrote a response letter. Not to the lawyer, to Sydney directly. His handwriting looked shakier than usual, emotion bleeding through in slanted letters. "Sydney, I know this offer came from you. I recognize your test, and I want you to know something with absolute certainty. No amount of money could compensate for what I destroyed. No settlement could undo the betrayal or erase the consequences I earned. No fresh start in another state could change the fact that I lost the only thing that ever truly mattered when I lost you. I'm not signing. I'm not leaving. I'm not taking shortcuts to escape what I did. If I ever earn your forgiveness, and I know that's unlikely, it'll be because I proved I'm different through consistent action over time, not because I took money to disappear. Keep your $250,000. I'd rather spend my life being worthy than spend my life being gone." He sent the letter and the unsigned documents and the check back to the lawyer via certified mail the next morning. Then he went to work at his sales job, volunteered at the shelter that night, serving food with steady hands, sat on his Saturday bench reading, refusing to let desperation or hope change his routine, and waited for the next test. It came 2 weeks later through Devon, his former business partner, who'd joined Sydney at TechWave. Devon called Justin on a Thursday afternoon, his voice friendly and casual. "Hey man, it's been a while. How are you holding up?" Justin hadn't spoken to Devon since the dissolution. Hearing his voice felt like touching an old wound that hadn't quite healed. "I'm surviving. What's going on?" "I've got an opportunity I wanted to run by you privately. I'm leaving TechWave next month to join Horizon Technologies as Chief Operating Officer. You heard of them? Big competitor, aggressive expansion strategy." "Exactly. And here's the thing. They want to crush Sydney's company, not compete. Crush. They're offering me a massive package to come aboard, but there's a condition." Devon paused. "They want insider information on TechWave's operations, client lists, pricing strategies, development roadmaps, everything that would let them systematically destroy Sydney's business model and steal her clients. Justin's stomach turned cold. "You're asking me to help you sabotage her?" "I'm offering you a job, Justin. Executive Vice President of Sales, $175,000 base salary plus equity that could be worth millions if we execute properly. You'd finally be able to rebuild, get back on your feet, prove you're not finished. All you'd need to do is provide some strategic information you still have from your time consulting on the TechWave integration after she absorbed your company." "I don't have that information anymore. Everything was turned over when—" "Come on. We both know you kept copies, and even if you didn't, you know enough about how Sydney operates to give us a roadmap." Devon's voice turned persuasive. "Think about it rationally. She destroyed you, took everything you built, left you living in poverty, working some dead-end sales job. This is your chance for payback, your chance to show her you're not someone she can just crush and forget about." Justin closed his eyes, recognizing the test immediately. Sydney was watching this, waiting to see if he'd choose revenge or integrity when given the perfect opportunity. "Devon, are you even really leaving TechWave, or is this another test?" Silence. Then Devon laughed, the sound confirming everything. "You figured it out. Tell Sydney I'm not interested in payback or revenge or any shortcuts to rebuilding my life. Tell her I turned down $175,000 and insider access because the only person I want to prove anything to is myself. Tell her I'm not the man who destroyed our marriage anymore." "She said you'd say that." "Then why test me?" "Because she needed to know if you'd take easy revenge when offered, because she needed to see if you'd compromise your integrity for money when you're desperate. You passed, Justin." Devon paused. "Between you and me, keep doing what you're doing. She's watching closer than you think." Justin reported the unethical offer to industry authorities the next day anyway, documenting everything Devon had proposed, even though it was a test. Then he went back to his regular life. Work, therapy, volunteering, Saturday vigils, monthly letters to Sydney updating her on his progress without asking for anything in return. 3 weeks later, the final test arrived without warning or ceremony. Justin was leaving the grocery store with his carefully budgeted supplies, rice, beans, vegetables on sale, nothing extravagant, when he noticed an elderly woman struggling with a flat tire in the parking lot. She looked frustrated and frightened, fumbling with a jack she clearly didn't know how to use while other shoppers walked past without stopping. "Excuse me, Mum," Justin said gently, approaching carefully so as not to startle her. "Can I help you with that?" "Oh, thank God. I've been trying to figure this contraption out for 20 minutes. My grandson usually helps me with these things, but he's out of town visiting his father." Justin set down his groceries and got to work. The flat was more complicated than expected. The jack was old and temperamental, requiring patience and problem-solving. The spare tire was partially deflated, which meant it wouldn't be safe to drive on without repair. What should have taken 20 minutes turned into a 3-hour ordeal as Justin walked to a nearby gas station, used his last $20 to buy a tire patch kit and air pump, fixed the spare tire properly, installed it with careful attention, and made sure everything was secure before letting her drive away. The woman tried to pay him repeatedly. Justin refused every time with gentle firmness. She insisted on at least buying him dinner or giving him something for his time. He declined that too, explaining that helping was its own reward and he didn't need compensation for doing what was right. "You spent 3 hours helping a stranger," she said, her eyes filling with grateful tears. "In this heat, using your own money. Let me do something for you." "You already did something for me, Mom. You let me help. You gave me the chance to be useful to someone who needed it. That's enough. That's more than enough." He walked back to his car, picked up his now warm groceries, and drove home feeling lighter than he had in months. Helping someone without expecting anything in return, being useful without needing recognition or reward, acting with integrity when no one important was watching. That felt like evidence of genuine transformation instead of performance. What Justin didn't know was that Sydney had been sitting in her car 3 rows away the entire time, watching everything. She'd followed him from his apartment that morning as part of her surveillance testing. She'd seen him carefully count his money at the grocery store, choosing the cheapest options with the focus of someone for whom every dollar mattered. She'd watched him notice the elderly woman and approach without hesitation. She'd observed him spend 3 hours in brutal heat solving a problem that wasn't his responsibility, using his last cash to buy supplies, refusing payment despite obviously needing money desperately. Sydney had watched him walk away without once checking to see if anyone noticed his good deed. No performance, no looking around for validation, just quiet service and then moving on. She sat in her car after he drove away, crying for reasons she couldn't fully articulate, not because she forgave him, not because she wanted him back, but because she'd spent 6 months testing him with increasingly difficult scenarios, and he'd passed every single one by simply being consistent, by choosing integrity when offered easy money, by choosing ethics when offered revenge, by choosing kindness when no one he thought was important was watching. She'd built these tests to prove he hadn't changed, to justify her continued anger and validate her revenge, to document his inevitable failure so she could move on, knowing she'd been right about him. Instead, she'd proven something she didn't want to admit. Justin wasn't the man she'd married anymore. He'd become someone fundamentally different, someone she didn't know, someone she was terrified might actually be worthy of something she wasn't ready to give. Sydney drove home that evening and wrote another letter with shaking hands. Justin, you passed. Every test, the settlement, the job offer, the kindness when no one you knew was watching. You passed all of it with consistency that I can't dismiss or explain away. I don't know what that means yet. I don't know if I can ever trust you again after what you did. But I'm ready to talk. Just talk. One conversation. No promises, no guarantees, no expectations beyond honesty. Meet me at Brood Awakening on Peachtree Street, Saturday at 6 a.m. Come alone. Don't expect forgiveness. Just expect truth. She sealed it, mailed it before she could reconsider. Then she went to bed and lay awake all night, wondering if talking to him was the bravest thing she'd ever done or the stupidest mistake she'd make twice. Chapter 9. The Confrontation. Justin arrived at Brood Awakening at 5:30 a.m. on Saturday morning, 30 minutes before Sydney was scheduled to meet him. The coffee shop was nearly empty at that hour. Soft jazz played over speakers while the city slowly woke outside. The barista looked half asleep but smiled politely as Justin ordered black coffee with hands that couldn't quite stay steady. He chose a corner table with his back to the wall, an old habit from business meetings, and tried to control the anxiety threatening to choke him. He'd thought about this moment for 2 years, imagined it during lonely nights in his studio apartment, rehearsed what he'd say during his therapy sessions, practiced apologies and explanations and promises until they felt smooth in his mouth. But now that the moment was actually real, every prepared word felt inadequate and performative. Sydney walked in at exactly 6 a.m. with the punctuality she remembered. She wore jeans and a simple grey sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup visible. Justin had never seen her look more beautiful or more dangerous. She looked like someone who'd built armor from pain and wasn't sure whether to lower it. She ordered green tea at the counter, moved to his table with deliberate steps, sat across from him, and met his eyes with a gaze that felt like judgment and curiosity fighting for dominance. "Thank you for coming," Justin said quietly, his prepared opening already feeling wrong. "I'm not here to forgive you. I need you to understand that immediately before we go any further." Sydney's voice was flat, controlled, giving away nothing. "This isn't reconciliation. This isn't a fresh start. This is just a conversation." "I know. I'm here because I spent 6 months testing you with increasingly difficult scenarios, and you passed every single one, which either means you've genuinely changed in fundamental ways, or you're better at manipulation than I gave you credit for and you knew I was watching." She leaned forward slightly. "So I need to look you in the eyes and figure out which one it is. I need to see if your transformation is real or performance." Justin nodded, his throat too tight for words. "Why did you do it?" Sydney asked, the question landing like a blade. The real reason. Not therapy answers you've rehearsed, not explanations you've workshopped with Dr. Martinez. Why did you kiss her on our rooftop while I was downstairs working late to help your company succeed? The question was a knife, precise and deserved. Justin took a breath and told the truth he'd spent 18 months excavating through brutal self-reflection. Because I was terrified you'd outgrow me. You were smarter, more competent, better at everything that actually mattered in business and life. Everyone could see it, I knew it, and instead of working to become someone worthy of you, instead of growing to match your level, I sabotaged us. His voice cracked. I found someone who made me feel powerful and successful without actually requiring me to grow. Brielle saw me as this big-shot businessman. She validated my ego. She didn't challenge me or push me or expect me to be better. She just reflected back a version of me that felt good without being real. And that felt easier than doing the actual difficult work of becoming the man you deserved. So you destroyed our marriage because being with me required actual effort. Sydney's voice was cold, factual. Yes, I destroyed our marriage because I was a coward, because I chose comfort over growth, because I was so insecure about my own inadequacy that I burned down the best thing in my life rather than face how much work I needed to do to deserve it. Justin's hands shook around his coffee cup. I chose someone who made me feel good over someone who made me better. That's the truth. That's the pathetic, inexcusable truth. Sydney's face remained expressionless, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or acknowledgement of honesty. And now? What makes you think you're different? What makes you believe you've actually changed instead of just learned better lies? I lost everything. My business, my money, my reputation, every comfort I'd ever known. I've spent 2 years living in a studio apartment that costs less per month than we used to spend on dinners, working a job that pays $42,000 a year, eating rice and beans most nights because that's what I can afford, walking miles to save bus fare, volunteering at a homeless shelter because I understand now what it feels like to lose everything and need someone to believe in your humanity anyway. Justin met her eyes steadily. I'm not saying I'm fixed or perfect. I'm saying I'm different because I had to build myself from absolute zero with no shortcuts. And this time I built someone I can actually respect, someone who chooses integrity when it costs him everything. They talked for 4 hours after that. The coffee shop filled and emptied around them while they excavated the ruins of their marriage. Sydney didn't spare him anything. She told him exactly what his betrayal had felt like, the moment she'd seen him kissing Brielle, the cold calculation as she'd locked that door and shut off the power, the hollow emptiness she'd felt building an empire on ashes of their relationship. The way winning completely hadn't fixed anything had actually made her emptier somehow. Justin listened without defending himself, without making excuses or minimizing any of her pain. He just let her speak every hurt she'd been carrying for 2 years, absorbing it like penance he'd earned. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said, when she finally paused, exhausted from excavating pain. I don't think what I did can be forgiven. Betrayal that fundamental doesn't just get erased because someone feels sorry afterward. But I want you to know that destroying my life was the best thing you could have done for me. It forced me to see who I'd become. It gave me the chance to rebuild myself correctly from foundation up. And even if you never speak to me again after today, even if this is the only conversation we ever have, I'm grateful for that opportunity, because losing you taught me what you were worth, and I was so catastrophically blind, Sydney, so unbelievably stupidly blind to what I had. Sydney studied him for a long moment with an expression he couldn't read, really looked at him, at the weight he'd lost, at the thrift store clothes, at the exhaustion around his eyes, at the quiet dignity he'd somehow built from humiliation. You look different, she said finally. I am different. I'm someone who knows what losing everything costs. I'm someone who understands that trust is fragile, and love requires work, and betrayal has permanent consequences. I'm someone who wouldn't survive losing you twice, because there wouldn't be anything left to build from. You don't have me to lose. You lost me 2 years ago on that rooftop. Sydney's voice was firm but not cruel. I know. But if there's any part of you that could ever consider giving me a chance to earn something new, not what we had, which I destroyed, but something built on honesty this time, I'd spend every day proving I'm worth the risk. Justin's voice was steady, despite everything riding on this moment. Not trying to recreate what I destroyed, trying to build something better from what remains. Sydney's hands trembled slightly around her teacup, the first crack in her careful control. You hurt me more than anyone has ever hurt me in my entire life. I know. You made me into someone I didn't recognize, someone cold and ruthless and empty, someone who destroyed people for sport. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so desperately, completely sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry is just words. No, it doesn't. Only time and consistent action fix things. Only proving through daily behavior over months and years that I've actually changed. Only building trust one choice at a time until maybe someday you can believe me again. They sat in silence for 5 minutes while the coffee shop bustled with Saturday morning regulars around them. Justin watched emotions flicker across Sydney's face, knowing his entire future hinged on whatever decision she was making behind those careful eyes. Finally, Sydney spoke. I don't trust you. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again after what you did. That's fair and rational. And I don't love you anymore, not the way I did before you destroyed everything. I understand completely, but I'm tired of being the woman you made me into through betrayal and my revenge. I'm tired of emptiness and winning battles that don't actually matter. I'm tired of being powerful and alone and dead inside. Sydney's voice cracked slightly. So here's what I'm willing to offer. Nothing concrete. Not yet. But if you want to keep proving you're different, keep showing up, keep being consistent, keep being the man you claim you've become, and maybe eventually we'll see what's possible. No promises, no guarantees, just possibility. Justin felt something crack open in his chest. Not hope exactly, but something more valuable. The chance to prove himself. The opportunity to earn something he'd destroyed. As they stood to leave, Sydney's hand accidentally brushed his while reaching for her purse. The contact was electric and brief and devastating, a reminder of what they'd had. Justin pulled back immediately, respecting her space and boundaries, which only made Sydney's breath catch in a way she didn't expect. Same time next week? Justin asked carefully, not wanting to push. Don't push it. I'll let you know if I'm ready for another conversation. Don't assume this changes anything. Okay, I'll wait. Sydney walked toward the door, then turned back with an expression he couldn't read. Justin? Yes? You were right about one thing. Destroying you did force you to change. I just wish you'd changed because you wanted to be better for us, not because I had to demolish your entire life to make it happen. Me too. But I'll take transformation any way it comes, even if it came 2 years too late to save what we had. Sydney left without responding. Justin sat back down at the table, finished his cold coffee, and allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in 2 years. The faint possibility that redemption might exist, even for catastrophic mistakes. Above the coffee shop, the sun rose over Atlanta, painting everything gold. And for the first time since locking that rooftop door, Sydney wondered if rebuilding might be harder than revenge, but infinitely more valuable than staying empty forever. Chapter 10. The Rooftop Redemption. 3 months after their coffee shop meeting, Sydney sent Justin a text at 4 p.m. Rooftop tonight, 8 p.m. You know the address. Justin read it 17 times, his hands shaking. The rooftop, where everything had ended in darkness and betrayal. He arrived at 7:45 p.m., wearing simple clothes. No pretense, just the man he'd become. The doorman stepped aside when Sydney's name appeared on the approved visitor list. Justin took the elevator to the 15th floor, his heart hammering with each passing number. The rooftop access had been completely redesigned. He walked through a beautiful interior space that opened onto the terrace, and what he saw stopped him cold. The rooftop was transformed. Sophisticated lighting made the space glow, comfortable furniture around a fire pit, plants creating intimate spaces. Every trace of what happened here erased, rebuilt into something entirely new. Sydney stood at the far edge, her back to him, looking at Atlanta's skyline. "You came early," she said without turning. "I didn't want to be late. Not here, not tonight." She turned slowly. "I bought this penthouse 6 months after I destroyed your company, gutted it completely. I told myself it was about reclaiming the space, erasing the memory. But it didn't work." "Why not?" "Because I was doing to this apartment what I'd done to you, trying to rebuild by destroying first. That's not healing. That's just construction." She walked to where the door used to be. "I've spent 2 years building an empire to prove I didn't need you, and I don't. I'm capable and powerful completely on my own, but not needing you doesn't mean I don't want to see if we could build something different. Not what we had. Something new. Something honest." Justin's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying destroying you didn't fix me. Winning completely didn't make me happy. I spent 2 years watching you transform while I stayed frozen in anger." Her voice cracked. "Maybe it's time I figured out who I am without revenge defining me." "What do you need from me?" "Complete honesty. We start as strangers, as the people we've become. We rebuild trust brick by brick, and if you ever betray me again, if you lie even once, I walk away forever. No explanations, just gone." "I understand." "Do you?" "I'm not talking about the man I married. That man is dead. I'm talking about seeing if there's something worth building with who you've become. I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if this is healing or self-destruction, but I'm tired of being powerful and alone." Justin's eyes filled. "I don't deserve this chance." "No, you don't, but maybe that's not what matters." Sydney extended her hand. "Maybe what matters is whether two broken people can rebuild together instead of staying broken separately." Justin walked across the rooftop slowly. When he reached her, he took her hand gently, like holding something infinitely fragile he'd already broken once. "This doesn't erase what you did," Sydney said, tears on her cheeks. "I don't forgive you or trust you or love you like before, but holding on to anger was destroying me more than punishing you. So we start from zero. You earn every moment, every conversation, every piece of trust. If I ever doubt you, I'm gone. I'll spend every day proving I'm worth this chance. You better, because I won't hesitate to walk away." They didn't kiss. They sat side by side, looking at the city, not about passion or pretending everything was fixed, about choosing to try something impossibly difficult because staying broken hurt more. "Tell me about the shelter," Sydney said quietly. "About the men you help." Justin told her about Jackson fighting back to his kids, about Michael who'd lost everything to mental illness, about men learning to live with consequences while building something better. "They remind me I'm not unique," Justin said. "Just another person who destroyed something good and has to figure out if redemption is possible. The difference is I had further to fall because you gave me so much to begin with." Sydney listened, really listened, and felt something other than empty for the first time in 2 years. They talked until midnight about therapy, business, who they'd been versus who they were becoming. No promises, no plans, just existing together without destroying each other. Revolutionary after everything. When Justin stood to leave, Sydney walked him to the door. "Same time next week?" he asked carefully. "Maybe. Let's see how this sits first." "Fair enough." Justin stopped. "Sydney, thank you for seeing I'm different, for risking being hurt again when you have every reason not to. I know what this costs. It costs us both. That's the point. If this works, we both risk everything. If it doesn't, we both lose twice." She met his eyes. "Don't make me regret this." "I won't. Don't promise. Just show up. Be consistent. Be honest. Be the man you've proven you can be." Justin left. Sydney stood alone on the rooftop, watching city lights blur through tears. She'd destroyed him to prove she could survive without him, won every battle, built an empire from his ashes, and now she was risking it all for the possibility that two broken people might build something good together. It was the bravest thing she'd ever done, braver than revenge, braver than success, braver than being powerful and alone. Because forgiveness after betrayal wasn't weakness, it was strength refined through fire. It was choosing healing over winning. It was admitting that sometimes the hardest work wasn't destroying someone who hurt you, but rebuilding yourself enough to risk being hurt again. Sydney walked inside her renovated penthouse. Tomorrow she'd go back to being tech's most ruthless CEO. But tonight, on this rooftop where everything had ended, she'd chosen to see if anything could begin again. Not what they'd had. That was gone forever. Something new. Something earned through suffering and growth. Something built brick by brick through honesty and time and the daily choice to show up even when terrified. The door closed with a soft click, and for the first time since locking Justin in darkness 2 years ago, Sydney felt something other than empty. She felt hope, fragile and terrifying and absolutely real. Sydney poured wine and stood at her window looking at Atlanta. Somewhere out there, Justin was probably crying with relief and fear. Two broken people had chosen to try building something together instead of staying broken alone. It might work. It might fail spectacularly, but at least it was honest. At least it was real. At least it was better than power and emptiness and revenge that had left her dead inside. Sydney raised her glass to the city lights. Here's to starting over. Here's to being brave enough to risk being hurt again. Here's to building something new from ashes. Then she drank and felt, for the first time in 2 years, like she might actually survive into something that looked like happiness.